Hello, we are back with Real Talk with Jesse and Sherrod, and we have our wonderful guest with us, Georgmarie Moore. Yay!
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Today, we are going to be talking about grief, and Georgmarie is our wonderful colleague at ViaLink who came up with the idea actually for the episode and has offered to come on and share her insight and her experiences. Georgemarie also works at ViaLink. She has a clinical background as well and is just a wonderful, amazing person who we've had the privilege to work with. So, George Marie, I'd love if you could maybe just share with our listeners a little bit about you and your role at ViaLink and anything you'd like to share.
Sure. Well, let's see. I've been with ViaLink as of last Wednesday for 17 years. I started off part-time and as a call center specialist, went to full-time and gradually supervisor, and I am the quality assurance manager. I make sure all of our calls match all of our call reports and all of our information that's needed. That's what I do. I make sure everything's running smoothly as I can. So, and like you said, Chair, to have a background in, clinical mental health. So definitely use that. So,
And George Marie is very humble too, because she is an absolute badass at her quality assurance. She literally accidentally took over a session at a national conference we were at because the information she had to share was like even more in depth than the presenter. And she is also one of our wonderful on-call supervisors for the contact center and just shows an amazing amount of support for our contact center specialists. And we all really love her because she's amazing.
Yes, very awesome supervisor.
thank you. I work with a great team, so didn't do it without y'all.
Teamwork makes the dream work.
Yes.
So today, like we stated, we are going to be talking about grief. All three of us, as most people in the world, have been affected by grief, and we are going to be sharing our own experiences and talking through grief, both as our own personal experiences and from a clinical perspective. We did just want to give a little bit of a content warning that we will be having a really frank and open and real talk discussion about grief. So, for anyone who may listen to us who is going on their own grief journey, if this content today isn't supportive of where you're at in that journey, of course, just please feel free to pause this episode and pick it up if you ever feel like you might be a place where it will be helpful. But as helpful as it can be to talk about grief and be open about it when you're not in that place where it's helpful and supportive to hear other people's grief stories, there is no shame in that. That's an important part of getting strength and going through grief. So please just listen to your own mind and your own body and support yourself and take care of yourself. So we again very, very much want to thank George Marie for inventing this episode and
Mhm.
agreeing to share her really personal story with us. I think we all three just wanted to share a little bit about sort of the perspectives of grief, our own grief journeys that we've been on that are going to more inform the place that we'll be speaking from today. Um, I don't mind going first, just really quick. I had not anticipated having this story to share when we first incepted this episode. But this past Christmas, I did go through a loss. We're recording this in January. But my best friend, my friend since kindergarten, her mother passed away on Christmas Eve. Um, and I would say that has been a very different experience of grief for me. Grieving my friend and how sad she is and experiencing what she's going through and trying to support her. And her mother was wonderful, beautiful person who's been like a second mom to me my whole life. And I deeply miss her, and it is so new. I actually have had a pretty hard time figuring out the ways I like to talk about it. So, what better way than a podcast? So, thank
Mhm.
you all for
Right.
allowing me to share that today. And that's the perspective I'll be talking from today.
I guess I'll go. So definitely have my share of grief, especially around the holidays. Let's see, this past December made 20 years since my grandmother passed a week before Thanksgiving. This makes 12 years since my dad passed on Christmas Eve. And this is the second year after my mom passed, January 24th, this coming month. And then also, um, kind of as a way that grieving is not just for with humans. This is I believe this was the fourth year since losing my a Labrador Retriever that I'd had since she was 6 weeks old and she was 14 um, a week before Christmas as well. So, you know, a lot of grief around the holidays, definitely. And then also just found out last week that my godfather passed away unexpectedly. So December and January can be very tough.
Yeah, and we will today be talking about that specifically, that process of grief and supporting yourself during the holidays and afterwards as well.
Yeah. The perspective I'll be talking from today, the biggest grief that I've lost is my grandpa. This October will be 9 years. So um, it's been tough, but that's the perspective I'll be coming from because that was probably the biggest loss I've ever experienced in my life and really had to deal with grief and learn all the stages and just getting through it at the end of the day.
Thank you. Thank you both. And Jesse, you just did an amazing segue into our first talking point, as we'll be talking a little bit the stages of grief and more how we would like to highlight that grief is a journey. I'm sure most people here have heard of the stages of grief. That's a theory from Keebler-Ross. The original stages, which have been expanded upon since then, being denial, bargaining, depression, anger, and acceptance. We wanted to touch on this. For me, it's something that hits quite close to home in the work I do clinically with our survivors of suicide loss support group. I hear so often from people who are coming into the group where they always are expressing, these stages like, sure, I experience these emotions, but before you go through grief, you think, okay, it's like a checklist. Like, I'll be angry and then I'm done with that. And then I'll be depressed and then I'll be done with that. But it's so much more of a roller coaster and a journey as we keep calling it. So,
Mm.
I mean, Georgemarie, I'd love, if you would maybe be able to share what do you think about the stages of grief and what has this journey been like for you?
Well, this definitely have gone through all those stages, more times than I think I can count. Probably lost track of it. And it's not, those stages aren't something that are linear. They do not come like within like a time frame. I mean, I still um go through some of those with in regards with my mom. While my mom was in the hospital, I was bargaining with God, like, please bring her home and I'll stop doing this. And I guess I should have specified more what home meant, like coming home to me, not going home with him. Um, and the denial of right now, like with my godfather, it's like it hasn't really hit because I'm like, no, his picture from Christmas looked awesome. He looked so healthy, it hasn't hit me. And then like I've accepted, that, obviously my grandmother, my dad, my mom, my dog, they're not here. Um, but I do get like those bouts of depression and sadness, you know, at like the weirdest times. I mean, they will just, fall like I found something that said like grief has a funny way of playing tricks on us. It's like 1 minute you're fine, think everything's going great, and the next minute it'll hit you. So
Yeah.
it's like those stages are very, they come and go, and there's no like specific time frame, but even in regards to like how long it lasts, like you might be angry for a few seconds, or you might be sad for like a whole day. There's no limit. There's no, you can come and go just depending on what's going on.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you said that because I think like with the people when they read like the stages of grief, a lot of people expect, oh, I'm going to go through anger and then I'm going to go through acceptance and then I'm going to go through bargaining. And it's kind of like, that's not how it is. It's all mixed up. I mean, I remember when I lost my grandpa, I was angry all the time. And then, I would be, bargaining in my head, like, just trying to think. And then I don't think I went through acceptance for a long time. But I saw myself fall into depression, and it's just, I think people just think that kind of like what Sherrard said earlier, that it's a checklist and it's not like that. It's never going to be like that. Like it's like you
Mhm.
said, it comes and goes and you can have acceptance, but in having a good day and then you see something and it can, just
Mhm.
upset you. Like we were going down the highway to Georgia to visit my family, and my grandpa's favorite Bible verse is John 3:16. And I was, kind of sad, it was around Christmas, and I just look up and the truck in front of us that cuts us off had this sticker, John 3:16, on the back of his windshield. And at first I smiled because I was like, oh, he's with me. Like I felt in my heart get warm, and then I was angry that he wasn't gonna be at the, Christmas dinner. And then I was sad. So I mean, I think you hit it right on the spot when you said, it doesn't go through stages like that. It just comes and goes.
I like to
Exactly. It's just, it's one of those things. And that's when you learn how to recognize it, and how you handle, how you like recognize what it's coming from, and then how you handle those reactions. I mean, I remember my psychiatrist told me when my dad passed that he's like, when you're able to think of those memories and smile, you've made that full circle. He's like, that doesn't mean though that when you think of those memories, you're not going to be sad, you're not going to be angry. It's just you're going to smile a little bit more than the other ones. And it's true. I mean, there's things that I do, like when I'm cooking certain things, like I remember my things that my dad would say when I was cooking a certain dish, whatever, and it makes me smile, because it's like, yeah, but then it's kind of like, man, I really wish he was here to eat this,
Right.
like when I'd fix meals for like holidays or whatever, try to like I miss asking my mom, do you want me to fix you a plate?
Yeah.
And can't do that. So it takes time. So they're all, I think that is like once you have experienced grief, you're going to have that with you for the rest of your life. It's just, it's when it first hits you, it's this huge circle. And then over time, it kind of gets wrapped around with other things that kind of comfort it or soften the blow. So that circle is going to be with you. It's just going to get a little smaller because of like, the love and support and the memories and things that you add around that circle.
Right.
So it's not, you're never going to wake up one day and be like, oh, I'm done with grieving. Not grieving anymore. All done. Never going to happen.
That's
It's going to
exactly
get,
the
it's going to
biggest.
go, it's going to get a little easier. Each day it'll get a little easier.
Yeah.
Because you keep getting stronger. I think that's kind of one of the bigger misconceptions is that it's not so much that like you grieve less, quote unquote. I think that like our emotions get a little bit more manageable, but you continue to get stronger as a person as you keep living and surviving and grieving and learning yourself and what grief is. Because to me, I've always seemed more like the stages of grief are kind of like a permission slip of being like, you're allowed to feel all of these emotions. And I think nothing like grief will ever make you realize more that you're also allowed to feel more than one thing at once. Just like you touched on, Georgmarie, that something might make you smile, and then that's going to then make you sad, or just like the bumper sticker you said, Jesse, might make you smile and then make you angry. And that all of that is okay. And it is important to let ourselves feel every single emotion that we have, because we're going to be feeling it whether we acknowledge it or not. But then our power can come into, what are we telling ourselves with that emotion, and making sure that we keep the control over that narrative, because our thoughts are different than our feelings. And important in, like you said, George, me working through with a therapist or whoever it might be, to be sure that your self-talk is healthy. All of your emotions are healthy, but is your self-talk and your self-care and your coping healthy?
I like that about the permission slip. Yeah, that is, because a lot of times, like especially when you're having to do the arrangements or things like that. Like when my grandmother passed away, it was my mom, my dad, and other family members. When it was my dad, it was my mom and I. When it was mom, it was me, but my best friend was there with me. But it's just like you get that feeling like you have to be okay. Like you have to be able to perform and act like nothing is wrong so you can get through this. And it's having those permission slips is like, okay, if I break down while I'm reading um a hymn to put on the prayer cards for the funeral, that is okay.
Yeah.
I don't need to be like, Miss Prim and Proper at the funeral home because they've seen it all.
Right.
So,
They have. And I would just say, shout out to funeral home employees, because they really are amazing people
mm,
who accept and just like let people give their emotions out. And that's not an easy job. So,
mm,
unscripted moment, but thank you for anybody who works in that industry, because it helps people with the toughest times of their lives.
Yeah. I mean, that's definitely got to be a tough job, but very grateful for those people that are there for you when you're going through like the worst time of your life.
hmm exactly. It's hard for them. Definitely think all the things, and I noticed since my from my dad passing away to my mom's passing away, they actually a lot of the funeral homes will now offer like free phone counseling. It was like I was getting emails and I was getting check-ins from the funeral home, and I was like, "What is?" I'm like, "What? I didn't get this when my dad died." I didn't utilize them because I had my own support team, but I was like, "That's really a good resource," because I was fortunate to have, and I'm still fortunate to have my support team. A lot of people don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
And I'm glad that you mentioned that you have a support team, because a lot of people who are going through grief, they try to think of, they don't know certain things that like resources, like what could help them through grief, and if they don't have a support system, then sometimes they don't know. So it's always important to just kind of find like what kind of resources and tools help out the most when you're going through things, because grief looks different on everybody. So what it could be helpful to you may not be helpful to someone else. I know, like personally, my biggest tool has been my support system. I have been able to call my mom and talk to her about, if I'm feeling upset, or, talk to my wife about it, or, I've had a therapist as well, talk to them about it. As crazy as it sounds, I talk to my cats, and
mhm.
I feel like they listen, and so I feel like talking about it has been the best resource tool for me. And it might not be the best resource tool for someone else, but that's what I've done. And I've prayed a lot, and just kind of like read stuff online that's been very helpful. Do you have anything in particular that has helped you the most, like when you're going through these tough times? Or like, I know you've had a couple of deaths. Has something been more helpful to you with your dad versus your mom's?
Um, Really, it's like I've been very fortunate to have like mental health support. I've had the same psychiatrist for over 20 years, so he's helped me with that. And then over the past 2 years I've had a therapist, and so she's been very helpful with that, working through that. And then definitely support from areas that I didn't even know were there. Like my I had doctors who had found out, and they were just like they were comforting me, and I was like, they were like, if you need anything, you contact me. And I'm like, okay, thanks. Felt a bit weird, but I appreciated that. And then like knowing that I have family members who check in on me and friends that check on me, and that they give me the opportunity to talk. I
Right.
agree, just talking about it, you know, there's times like, now that I'm by myself, I will end up talking to myself. That's perfectly okay. I had to Google that the other night and make sure I wasn't losing it. Um, yeah, self-talk, it's like talking about a feelings, like if it was in the middle of the night and I didn't want to bother anyone, just talking about it. Mentally, I journal. I have too many issues to start an actual journal. That's a whole other podcast. Um, but like journaling, getting those feelings out, just you can't say you can't hold it in, because there are individuals. I mean, my mom isn't it was an example of someone who held in grief for over 10 years after my grandmother passed.
Yeah.
And I saw what that did to her. And so finding like those ways, I mean, like in different types of support, like, I mean, I I realized when I first started physical therapy, they are now part of my support team, because if I'm having a bad day or something happens and I'm not feeling that, or like something's triggering me, I can talk to them. They're not gonna like provide me any like clinical feedback or whatever, but they're there to listen. So just having someone to listen to you, because I mean that's another thing. When you hear someone talking about grief, you kind of like a deer in headlights. You're like, oh God, what do I say? I
Right.
don't need to say anything. I just need you there to listen. Just let me get this out. That's all you need.
Yeah. I think it, like you said, it's important to just, just because I think some people are worried about saying the wrong thing, or if they haven't dealt with grief, I think they get worried that they aren't going to be able to comfort you. I mean, and I've been very blessed. Like I said, my baby sister is probably my best friend, and we had to go through this together. And I remember her texting me at 3 a.m. being like, "Hey, you up?" And then just her just talking about, oh, because my grandpa's favorite team was Georgia Tech, so she'd be like, Georgia Tech plays tomorrow. And, I just know she just needed to get it out. There's nothing that she's really looking for. She just wanted to, talk about a memory real quick and just wanted to be heard. So, that's between her and my mom and my wife, that's been really very helpful, that I can count on them people, because, sometimes you just, like you said, you just need to get it out. It's not so much you really need someone to say anything. It's just, it's on your mind, and you just kind of want to say it to somebody, so so you just get it out and feel better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Having those people that let you get it out. I know for me, on Christmas Eve, after my friend had texted me that her mom had passed that evening, and I called her just to you say see how she's doing. I know she wasn't doing okay.
Yeah.
But I was at my sister-in-law's house for like our Christmas celebration. And so my husband came out, like my mom was with me, and I just looked at my mom and I was like, she died. Like I need to go out and call my friend. And
Hmm.
so my husband came out to check on me, and I just sobbed. Like I was like, I don't have words right now. And to have someone that could I mean, like sobbed in a way that like I don't know if I ever have before. It was like animalistic sobbing and just coming out of my body. And just someone that is comfortable letting you have that, or maybe they're not comfortable, but will be there for you while you're having
Right.
that experience, and know they don't need to say anything, that they just kind of need to be there and not try and quote unquote make it better. I mean, it's a really loving, one of the most loving things I think anybody can do for somebody is to have that kind of strength to be like, I'll get down in this space with you. And you don't have to climb up out of the hole right now for me. I'll be in there with you.
Yeah, I definitely agree on that.
And I think we've
Yeah,
touched on.
animalistic crying, sobbing, that wailing, that the type of cry you never knew you were capable of having. Yep,
Yeah.
I remember that all too well. The when I got the phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning about my mom.
Yeah.
So it is really helpful when you have someone who's like you said, Jared, who's willing to be there right along with you, and they don't have to say anything. They just be there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is very true. And I know that we've all talked about like kind of having, a therapist that we talk to, or, being able to talk to, a psychiatrist or somebody. Sherrod, I know you do groups with like different griefs and suicide awareness, loss and stuff like that. What is it like experience and grief being like a mental health professional for you?
Well, as I have continued to be going through this grief journey, when I will talk to my mom, because she's one of my biggest pieces of my support system, she'll always say, "Okay, now what would you tell your clients right now?" And she knows it's annoying to hear that, but it's really important because um it was to me it was so bizarre going through it's so weird going through grief when like I'm a grief therapist, like I've worked with this and I know the things, and so much of my grieving right now really is also entangled in being so sad for my friend. And I think when you have kind of that inner look at what grief really does to people, because I've provided that professional safe space where I hear all the things, and um, it just, like, almost makes it hit you harder, and
Yeah.
it's a lot easier it's a lot easier to try and guide other people than to have to implement the things yourself. I can definitely say that. I am really appreciative of my support system I have that know me so well, that know I tend to kind of want to, um run away sometimes from the bigger feelings, because I'm like, I don't really have time for that right now. And so I'm really appreciative of my friends and my mom and my husband who would check in on me and remind me, like, okay, like, we know you know the things. So we're not going to give you, the speeches about what grief is and what it is, but like, we're just going to remind you you're experiencing something. Cause I think I was talking with some friends of mine, with a married couple where one's a nurse and one is a firefighter, and was telling them kind of what I was going through. And I was like, I think because all three of us, like, we work with death in some realm, and you have to compartmentalize that, so that you can keep your brain healthy. Working is this, and my professional life is this, or whatever, personal life is this. And when that kind of blurs, it's really draining and exhausting because your brain just can't even figure out what it's supposed to be thinking about right now, or how it's supposed to be thinking about it, because
Right.
now I'm emotionally affected by something that I have boundaries up, which is grief, to not typically be so emotionally affected by when I'm just trying to be a therapist and supportive of my clients. So this is also why I have my own therapist. Shout out to Bonnie, she's amazing, and puts me on my stuff when I need it. But
Mhm.
so yeah, I think it's just that you have to have the people around you who can recognize that just because you work in a mental health field or have a mental health background doesn't mean that you can always navigate your own mental health with just like complete flawlessness. And I mean, y'all two know that as well. We've worked in a help giving profession. We've all worked on suicide helplines. We've all dedicated our lives to trying to help other people. And I think sometimes that almost makes it even more difficult when you're the one that needs help yourself. So
Yeah.
it's wonderful to have the people around you that know when you need help and you don't have to ask.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I definitely agree with you on that because like when you're the one that's usually helping, you feel like you have all the answers, but then when it's you, it's almost like you're clueless. It's almost like you don't know what to do. But like you said, like how they ask you, well, what would you tell a client? Like that's what I have to tell myself. I'm like, if I was talking to somebody, and was trying to help them through this, what would I say to them? And then it's sometimes hard to do that with yourself, but it's almost the best thing that you can do kind of to work through it because it's like you almost have all the answers when you're talking to someone else. But again, when it's you, you don't, it's like you're a deer in the headlights. You don't know what to do.
Yeah. And it's like, because we work in the mental health field, it doesn't exclude us from going through these things. I mean, we're not immune to it. We're going to have this in our own lives, and we will have this with clients. I mean, I've experienced when I was doing my internship losing a patient of natural causes, but it was just like, and I didn't know really at the moment how like to work through that, because I'd never, that wasn't something that was talked about in school, like how to handle when you lose a patient or a client for whatever reason. But I mean, you just got, I mean, it's thinking back, it's like, yeah, like what would you tell someone you were on the phone with, or you were seeing face to face, or whoever? And it's even, what would you say to a friend? It's like
Right.
those things you need to kind of tell yourself. You need to talk to yourself like you would talk to someone else that you care about, because you need to care about yourself first. Kind of like how they tell you, put your mask on first before you help the next person when you're on a plane. It's like you got to take care of yourself first. And
Yeah.
talking about the grief and the self-talk, positive self-talk, or whatever type of self-talk you need to talk to get you through it. So,
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I know a lot of people, especially during the holidays, I think a lot of people struggle with like traditions and changes and things like that. I know that was a big point when I was on the phone line that a lot of people would talk to me about like, well, we used to do this and now it's the first year and now, this isn't going to be here because they're gone. And, in my experience, my grandpa used to make this thing called Watergate salad and nobody liked it but him. I mean, he loved it. It was his favorite dessert. And I used to give him a hard time about it and stuff. And, you know, when the first year came around, you're sitting at Christmas and you're looking around and it's not there. It's like, oh, wow, like that was a tradition for us, and he read us the Christmas story and, different things. So it's like a lot of the traditions that, because Christmas was his favorite holiday, they were gone. And, we had to learn how to do Christmas without him, kind of, like create new traditions. And I will be honest, our family is just now getting there. I mean, we had our first Christmas this past Christmas where everybody was there because my grandma's still alive and she's still going through the grieving process really hard. And so um, she didn't really like leaving the house. It gave her anxiety. So, a lot, it was like our whole family Christmas was different. Like we would celebrate with my parents, but I wouldn't see like my uncle and his family because, they did their Christmas. And then, Christmas is so short, everybody's got to get back to work and stuff like that. So our tradition, to me, it felt like our family completely fell apart. And, our tradition for Christmas just completely like was gone. But then this past Christmas, we all got together. Now we just did it a couple weeks ago. We wasn't able to do it on Christmas, but it was the best time. Like we created new memories. All the grandkids got to play. My grandma was out of the house. We had pizza. We had all the kids running around. And it was just, it made me smile. Like at first, I was a little sad. I was like, man, my grandpa would have loved to be playing with all his grandkids and stuff. But then I was happy that like that was a new memory that we made together as a family in almost 9 years. And, I'm hoping, going forward, we'll have that and we'll also have new traditions. So I know that it can be tough for people who have certain traditions they've done their whole life. And then when that person or, is gone, they have to try to find new traditions or create new traditions and to balance, that happiness and sadness. And, that's been my biggest thing is that, just trying to find new ways to smile about Christmas instead of being like, well, you know, this and this and this. So sometimes you got to let old traditions go and create new ones. And the new ones, they make you smile and stuff, even though you still miss that person. But I was very glad that like we all got together and we all had a good time. So is there any like traditions or how have you dealt with like traditions and trying to balance them out since the loss of your parents and your grandma?
well, prior to my grandmother passing, she was kind of like the glue between like her side of the family. my grandfather had passed when I was 3. So if I don't talk about him, it's like obviously I grieved him, but I was 3, so I don't.
Right.
But with my grandmother, it was like we'd go to my aunt and uncle's house, and it was my mom, my dad, her, my aunt, and uncle, my 2 cousins, and I, and like that was our tradition. And so when she passed away, that stopped, and so that became it was my mom, dad, and I, and we did our own thing at home. And then after my dad passed away, kind of it was just my mom and I. We do things around try to do stuff around the house. And one tradition we had was the night that my dad passed away, I went to go the grocery to get something for dinner. So I got like a Stouffer's lasagna and Caesar salad mix. So for 10 years, every Christmas Eve, that's what we had. That was our new tradition. Um, and my mom was okay with that. It wasn't something like we discussed. It was just like a
Just
given.
kind of
And
happened.
yeah. And because my dad loved Italian food, like so that was kind of like a give a okay, this is kind of a memory of him. And then with my mom passing, it was I've been very fortunate. My best friend and her family have included me into their Christmas celebrations and everything. So it's like I think of those past memories and those past celebrations and traditions, and I think of them like I envy them, like I wish they were still around, but
Right.
those memories are something I hold dear and cherish. And so now I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make some new memories and new
Right.
traditions. And I mean, one thing, and kind of like you're saying, Jesse, about the dessert that your grandfather loved. Um, One thing that had been mentioned to me, like, was making their favorite dish or like eating their favorite food or something like that. Well, there are certain things I can and can't make depending on where
Right.
I'm doing, but that's an option. Like I try to do that like whenever whether it was my mom and dad and my mom and I, just me going to my best friend's house, whatever. I've tried to incorporate that because food was like a big thing with my family. I don't know why
Yeah, ours
it
too.
was. So, but just like and then getting being okay with the fact that your new traditions might not be the same every year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That had been a real hiccup with me because like I don't like change if I can help it. And so being able to go with the flow and just be like, it's okay. It's okay. It's not you're celebrating. That's what matters. You're celebrating and you're with loved ones.
Yeah.
So with that, as you're like learning and evolving and creating new traditions and holding on to other ones, what would you say with the holidays when you're experiencing grief during the holidays is kind of the best way that you can keep your self-care on track, or especially if there is something maybe that is particularly activating of those grief emotions, how to best take care of yourself during a time that doesn't really mesh well with holidays and grief
Yeah.
seem opposite.
Yeah, it's like, oh, everybody's, singing, celebrating, and you're just like, I'm miserable. No, it's like just first off, recognizing and acknowledging that you're experiencing this. Um, Reaching out to someone in your support system, and if they are truly part of your support system, they will understand that yes, this is generally a time for celebration, but right now you need to talk about this. This is something you're going through. You just need to get it out, talk about it. I mean, that's the best thing I can think of with self-care. Um, Doing something for you, like something that makes you smile, that, like thinking about doing something that you used to do on the holidays, but you haven't done for whatever reason, you know, just definitely acknowledging, like not ignoring it, because the ignoring is what's going to make it worse. At least that's
Yeah.
how I feel.
Yeah, and I think you're absolutely right. And I think like the most important thing is like maintenance going forward with dealing with grief, during the holidays and even after the holidays, because it's hard too, sometimes when you go through the holidays, you go through all those emotions, and then afterwards you could still feel, down in the dumps and things like that. So I've always told myself, it's very important to, when you find something that works for you, to just keep doing it. Like you kind of said something, you said, do something that you like for 5 minutes. And that's funny because like when I was on the suicide lines and when I would talk to people, I would always tell them like the best advice I've ever received was from my psychiatrist. And they said, no matter what you're going through and no matter how hard the day is, do something that you enjoy, whether it's cook your favorite meal, listen to your favorite song, take 5 minutes every day to do something, because that way at least during that day you've done something for yourself and that you had a good moment. It may have been, the rest of the day may have not been great, but you have that one moment where you dealt with yourself and gave yourself that 5 minute pep talk, or had to look in the mirror and be like, I got this, I'm beautiful, I'm smart, I'm strong. Or you had to listen to your favorite song, or you had to go and buy your favorite bag of chips, or call your support person and just have a conversation. So I think it's so important to, not just during the holidays, especially with grief, is to have ongoing maintenance and, self care, because that's what's important. That's what's going to get you through. And, kind of like you said, it doesn't ever, you don't wake up one day and you're not grieving. It kind of just softens. It's kind of like, you kind of learn how to live with the grief versus, because your whole world could be falling apart, but time doesn't stop. It keeps going. So you have to keep going with it. You just have to find ways that help you in the moment. And it might be one day, might be listening to music, versus the next day, it might be taking a bubble bath. I mean, things change, but
Hmm.
continuing to find things that help you and make you have self care is what I think is the most important thing that you can do for yourself.
Definitely. I mean, like I mean, one thing this over the past year that, because when I was a kid, I used to love to read it. I read all the time. And when I was taking care of my mom and when I was in school, I didn't have a chance to read for pleasure as much as I wanted to or used to. And so this past year, I read a significant amount of books and I was just like, okay, I'm already on my fifth book of the year and
Oh,
this is the 13th. So, it's like self-care is like reading for me. It's like for 5 or 10 minutes, however many times during the day, it's like, okay, I'm separating myself. This is my time. Listening to music, watching something on television, um, things like that that just kind of give you a buffer that just help you relax, like if you're able to take a bubble bath, great. That's not an option for me, but that's cool. I wish it was. But like I make sure several times during the day I go outside and
yeah,
I'm in the fresh air and I'm walking around. Um, I have people that were really close with my mom who I've never met, but are now my extended family who call and check up on me at least once a week, you know, because they
yeah,
know, you know, I got a security system as a form of self-care to make sure it's like, okay, well, I feel safe. Not that I didn't feel safe before, but it's like I feel safer. So
right,
it's just like whatever you can do. And it doesn't have to be like the norm, like, oh, I'm gonna eat some chocolate or I'm gonna have a bubble bath. It's whatever helps you that's healthy. Make that disclaimer for health, it's healthy. Um, you know, like, to just have those few minutes for you.
Yeah.
yeah,
I love that like perspective of it, of like just if you can find, even just if the rest of your day was unbearably hard, but you're able to give yourself a few minutes of something that makes it softer. And that just seems so much more achievable. And I think that's wonderful advice from both of you and from your therapist, Jesse. But that
Yes.
makes me then think to the other side of that coin. Have y'all ever gotten any advice, or do you even just hear advice, maybe not directed at you, that just like doesn't work, where you're like, that's no, that's bad advice?
Oh, that the
Um,
one where it's like, oh, they're in a better place.
yeah, that's one's not.
Or it'll get easy. It does get easier, but the way it's said right afterwards, it makes it seem like get no, it's not gonna get easy. Like
Right.
it's not really gonna get easy, but yeah, like it's
Or when people say you'll get over it one day.
yeah.
Ugh, yeah.
Mhm.
Ugh,
And I think that's I think that's the worst thing that's been told to me. Like you'll get over it one day, and I'm like, I don't think so, but thanks, So that wasn't really helpful. Or like, if you're like it gets better, just give it time. And that's the thing. Like time is such a priceless thing, but at the end of the day, yes, it does get a little easier in the fact of you're learning how to cope and deal with it. It doesn't get easier the fact that you're hurt. You like you said, the circle is always there. And like my mom lost her dad when she was 20, so and she found out like 2 months after that she was pregnant with me. So it's been 37, almost 38 years, and there are still times when me and my mom talk about her dad, I can see her tear up, or you know um get emotional. And it's been 37 years. So when you tell someone, why aren't you over that yet, or you know you should have already been done with it, or it's been this amount of years, get over it. It's not how it works. And until someone really experiences grief, you know yeah, them things might sound like it's okay, but it's more hurtful. And sometimes it makes you more angrier, especially when it's something that's happened like right afterwards, and someone's like, you know it'll be okay, you'll get over it. And I mean, I remember when somebody said that to me, and it was like a day that my grandpa was passed away, and I was just like, oh my goodness, did they really just say this to me? Like, I was so angry, I just had to walk away. So I mean, it's hard, for people. I think people, like you said, people sometimes don't know what to say to somebody. And I say the best thing that's I've always, before I even knew what grief was, and people have lost, their mom or dad, and, their friends and stuff, I would just try to listen. I wouldn't try to tell them, so much advice. I would just be like, I'm here for you. Anytime you want to talk, I'm here for you, because sometimes, everyone's different. So advice, to me, I don't like to give it when it comes to grief, because I think grief is different for everybody. So for me, if I have a friend that's going through something, I just make sure they know I'm there for them. No matter what, like no judgment, no, if you need to call me at 3 a.m. just to cry, and you just need somebody to listen to you cry, you don't need me to say a word, I'm there. Like, I'm your person. I'll be there for you no matter what. But, I know everybody's like, well, what advice? I don't have any advice. Even though I've dealt with grief, I think that you have to really go through it on your own. Like, I really think you got to learn. You got your support system, and that's amazing. And self care, it would be the only two things that I would say kind of just dwell in, is your self care and support system. But as far as like giving real advice, like, I just don't really have it, because, like I said, I believe grief is different for everybody. And I just say the best thing any person could do is just be there. At the end of the day, that person just needs someone to really be there. So, um, I think that's what's important.
I agree,
Yeah. And I think
100%.
sometimes those messages that are, they're in a better place, or this too shall pass, and what have you, that are not actually particularly helpful, they come from a place of us like being uncomfortable. Like when you care about someone and you see them grieving, it's hard because you love them. You don't want them to have to be going through that. And you keep kind of thinking, like, oh, if I could just say this perfect nugget, it'll make it better. And it doesn't. It makes it worse. It makes someone feel alienated, when really, I think, like I said, the most loving thing you can do is what we've all been saying, is just be there. Or even to say, I know there's nothing I can say. I wish I could make this better, and I am here for you, whatever you need. There's no problem with saying you don't know what to say. I think people would appreciate that more.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Honest, it's like I think another thing reason why. or possibly why people say, those things like they're in a better place or it shall get easier is the deer in headlights, not knowing what to say. But also, it kind of is a way that it's like a smack in their own face, like, oh God, what if I had to deal with this?
Right.
And so it startles them, like, oh no, I don't know what to do. But I mean, like whenever like I see friends or family on social media who's lost someone, you know, I'm just like, I am so sorry. You and your family are my thoughts and prayers. Because that to me was the most comforting thing I heard. It's like, I'm sorry. I'm still thinking of you. It's like, I don't know what else. Like, I'm not offering you a solution. I'm not offering you a way to feel better. I'm letting you know how, like, I empathize with you and I'm here.
Right.
And we would,
Yeah.
like to remind everybody, if you're ever feeling like you need emotional support, that 988 is available 24 hours a day. You just dial those three numbers, 988. It is free, it is confidential, though it is the suicide prevention lifeline, and we are always there if suicide is what you're struggling with. We are there to support you through whatever it is you're going through. So if you are grieving because a friend is grieving, whatever that might be, there is a caring ear. There's a caring ear there 24 hours a day. Um, it's people that want to hear from you because you matter and what you're going through matters. And sometimes it can be hard to figure out where you want to reach out to. So when you're not sure where to turn to start getting that gunk out, call 988. And we've also got resources on there too for anybody who may be looking for grief support or mental health support or whatever that might be. So just never, ever hesitate to call. Please reach out to 988 whenever you need to talk.
Yeah, and if you feel like you just can't talk and you just want to text, you can always text 988 as well. They do have counselors on there 24/7 as well. So, if it's easier, sometimes it's hard to talk and you just want to get it out and you just want to text and want to do it that way. 988's same hours, open 24/7, 365 days a year. So they're there as well.
And it's live when you're texting. It's not a bot.
Yes.
Mhm.
Thank you for reminding me about the texting, Jesse. And I'm exhausted. But I'm really glad that
Yeah.
we got to talk about this. It's hard, but it's important. Thank you so much, Georgmarie, for coming on with us today and really being so open to share your experiences. Thank you to Jesse. Thank you to myself. Grief is not
Gross.
easy to talk about, but it's how we find our communities and how we find our
Yeah.
support.
Mhm.
All right, Jesse, you ready to attempt this sign off?
Yeah, let's do it.
You've been listening to Real Talk.
No
No filters,
filters, no
no
fluff,
fluff,
just real
just
talk.
real talk. Nailed it.
We did good.
Everybody take care, and we will see y'all in 2 Tuesdays, or hear you, or you'll hear us. Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Bye.
Bye.